Welcome to RealtyCast Global, where we bring insights and advice from top professionals in the global market. Join us for a journey of culture and real estate from countries across the globe. Welcome back, Michael. Episode 3, Investing in Central America. We have learned a lot of information about what to do and what not to do. And there's one statement that you say, and I've thought about it over and over and over. You don't know until you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's if we could walk away with one thing today, it's buyer beware.
Yeah.
The second thing would be you don't know until you know. And there's a meaning behind that. It goes beyond words. It's about being educated before you make that first step. And don't just fly into the country and say, oh my gosh, how wonderful it would be to have a vacation home here and I could do this, this, and this. And all of a sudden you bought it and then the problems begin sometimes if you don't do your homework. If you don't do your homework. As we talk about investing in overseas properties, you've put together a wonderful document called Overseas Investment Guide. This is one of 3 that I've seen. You may have more. And we're going to put that in the episode description part of our episode so that you can see, our viewers can see how to get one of these investment books. Because I think it's important to have this if you're thinking about anything beyond the United States as far as investments. The first question, why you have written about perception and reality as the primary investment factor in the region?
Sure. Yeah. In the markets, like in Wall Street, in the financial markets, there's a term called arbitrage. And arbitrage is basically a knowledge gap, right? It's an information gap. And I remember, in fact, they made a movie about this, where they laid a line from New York to London, right? Like a fiber line under the ocean, because that would be, 5 milliseconds faster than sending it up to the satellite and back down or something, or a second faster. I forget what it was. But in that 1 second of difference in time, the computers in New York City could transact on information that nobody else had, right? Until it got there a second later. So it was an information gap. It was arbitrage, right? And they could make the money in the, what I call the information gap. Well, Central America, some countries more than others, right, have this incredible perception gap. I would say, look, the Zogby company did a survey of 103,000 U.S. citizens. I mean, that is a huge statistical sample, right? 103,000 U.S. citizens were surveyed. 11.6 had said that they had seriously considered owning property overseas. So let's just call that 1 out of 10, 11.6, 1 out of 10, right? So 1 out of 10 people has seriously considered owning property overseas, 1 out of 10 U.S. citizens, right? But 9 out of 10 haven't, let's be very clear. Like the bigger number just never has considered it. And so, from a perception standpoint, even a country that's done a tremendous job of public relations, Costa Rica, oh my gosh, they may have been hired the best public relations firm ever to turn their country into this unbelievable destination, right? It just Costa Rica, oh. Okay, fine. I mean, whatever. I mean, you love it, hate it, doesn't matter. But they did a tremendous job of selling their country, right? But even so, many, many, many Americans would look at Costa Rica and go, oh my gosh, I would never go there. I don't want to get killed, right? Or whatever, right? Mexico, Mexico is really dangerous. Nicaragua, you got to be kidding me, whatever, right? And so you've got this perception, even on the part of people who do travel, right? And it's varied. They might think, I'd go to Costa Rica, but there's no way in heck you'd get me to Nicaragua, right? Okay, when in actuality, the crime statistics in Nicaragua and Costa Rica are almost identical. Sometimes Nicaragua is a little safer, sometimes Costa Rica is a little safer. But you wouldn't know that from perception, right? From perception, you'd think, Nicaragua, I'm going to get killed if I go there. Costa Rica, can't wait, looking forward to my vacation, whatever. So you have this perception gap. And what the perception gap does is it largely, in many cases, determines pricing, right? So, for example, when Nicaragua and Costa Rica border, right? Costa Rica is on the southern part of Nicaragua. If you literally took a piece of property in Costa Rica in 10 miles south of the Nicaraguan border, right on the Pacific Ocean, you said, I want to buy a half-acre lot on the Pacific Ocean in Costa Rica, 10 miles from Nicaragua, you'd pay, I don't know, $300,000, $500,000 for the property. Pick the number, but that kind of number, maybe more, maybe $500,000 and up, right? If you literally went 10 miles into Nicaragua and bought the exact same property, same ocean, same view, same weather, same everything, you might pay $250,000, right? So it's half price, right? And there's no difference except for perception. Perception is the difference. Now, the nice thing about perception is that it changes, right? Things can go up, things can go down, right? And so generally what we've seen over, my experience, 30 years of working in the region, is that perceptions of the region have gotten better. Some countries faster than others, some countries slower than others, right? But the perception's getting better. And as the perception gets better, this arbitrage closes. This perception gap closes. The money is getting made by somebody. And so why this perception gap is so important, right? And why we talk about it in the Investor's Guide is that if you can be ahead of a change in perception for the better, right? But sometimes change perceptions for the worse too, don't get me wrong. I mean, it can go either way. Future's hard to predict, of course, right? But generally over a longer term, 5, 10, 15 years, the perception in the region has gone up. And if you can be ahead of the perception with your purchase price and let perception catch up to it, you made the money in the middle. You, the investor, made the money in the middle. And that is the importance of perception versus reality. And again, each country has tracked differently. Each country's had its ups and its downs, and definitely, it's not a straight line. It's a bumpy line. But overall, the countries of the region have largely gotten better in their perception on the part of many North American property buyers and vacationers. And that bodes well for the people that bought when the perception was negative or not popular.
So it's kind of an ever-changing thing. You're talking about perception.
Yeah.
For the positive, as I would say, as the right type of advertisements, and you see great things happening, people moving large hotels, into the area, and you see a little bit more stability, that perception maybe changes some in the mind of the investor that's moving there. So
or the traveler.
Or the traveler. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's a great thing to think about. I've never really thought about it that way. You also produce a path of progress chart. You produce that, and why would that be important to me or you as an investor? A path of progress chart. Right.
And we touched on this last time when we were talking about Belize, but this is that chart, right? Let me see. I mean, basically countries like Nicaragua, not very popular. Pacific side of Costa Rica, very popular, right? And so I call it the investment return curve, right? And it is a path of progress curve, but it's also a popularity curve. And I think fundamentally, you've got two things going on. One is, development, right? Path of progress. And some progress can be internally generated, right? A country either gets money from the World Bank or it has its own tax base and it invests that money in infrastructure, roads, bridges, public transportation, whatever it is, telecommunications infrastructure, although a lot of that tends to be private sector, thank goodness. And so, so you've got investment in, just call it general infrastructure, that can drive this development curve or this path of progress curve, right? But the other piece of it, when it really comes down to the typical North American investor. Most North Americans, very few North Americans, are investing in telecommunications or maquila manufacturing or call centers. Although there is that type of investment as well. But you're in the real estate business. I'm in the real estate business. Most real estate investors are looking for appreciation and cash flow. Most people looking for cash flow over appreciation, right? As investors in the real estate space, and so. So while we have this infrastructure piece, the telecommunication, roads, water, blah, 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 kind of ground up being generated not by us as investors, right? You've also got this piece that has to do with popularity. And the popularity piece is, well, how many people are traveling there, right? I mean, and to use the analogy of a honeymoon couple, right? That's really how I put these countries or locations within a country on the chart. I just simply said, if somebody got married this weekend, where are they going on their honeymoon next Monday? And not many going to Nicaragua, and a whole bunch of them going to Costa Rica, and then everything in between. So this popularity effect, right? Traveler, overnight visitor, right? Really has a lot to do with two things. One, the price of acquisition, right? And two, the amount of cash flow that you might expect. Because again, if it's popular, that means there's lots of honeymooners and travelers coming down. They're staying in your condo or your home. They're renting it, however you do it, VRBO or whatever, or it's a branded product, something like that. Anyway, the overnight occupancy is what's generating cash flow. In a very popular destination, you're going to pay more for that. You're going to pay more to acquire the asset. If you buy something in a less popular country or a less popular location, then you're going to pay less. You're going to, your acquisition costs will be lower. Your occupancy early years will definitely be lower, right? Your ADRs, average daily rate, will be lower. If you're a patient investor and you say, look, I got a 3, 5, 7 year timeline, like I would rather acquire, I'm going to use really simple numbers, 100,000 versus 200,000, because I can do the math in my head, right? So let's say you bought something in Nicaragua for 100 versus something in Costa Rica for 200, right? And your occupancies were equal, but they wouldn't be. But let's just say your occupancies were equal, right? 50% occupancy, $100 a night, right? So that's what, 365 divided by 2, that's $17,000. In Costa Rica, let's just say your average daily rate was $200 a night. Well, now you're at $34,000, or maybe it's $36,000, whatever. Anyway, but you see the point, right? But your cost was $200 to achieve, a higher, right, cash flow, but your ROI might actually be lower because you're basing it on a $200,000 acquisition cost, right? Whereas if you're willing to spend $100 and take a longer time frame, like as it goes, your acquisition cost is $100. That's fixed. You've spent that, right? As your occupancy goes from 50 to 60% and your ADRs go from 100 to 120 to 150, your ROI, by the time you get to a property that's worth 200 that you only paid 100 for, now your ROI might be like, high, whatever. I mean, 15, 18, 20, 24%, right? On your original cash flow, on your original acquisition cost, right? And so on the other hand, maybe this is why it's an investment. You win, you lose. You're an investor, risk, reward. On the other hand, it flatlines and it never becomes more popular, or, God forbid it tanks and it gets really unpopular, right? I mean, that's the risk side of the equation, right? But the reward side, again, over in most cases, 3, 5, 7, 10 years, like what's going to happen is you're going to get higher ADRs, higher occupancy, but your fixed cost, is a much lower. So, but there are people who say, I don't want that risk. I'd rather just buy something in Costa Rica for $200,000-$300,000. I'd rather have a lower ROI, but a much more predictable investment. And so those are the two extremes. A country like Belize, I think sits in the sweet spot. It's climbed maybe halfway up the popularity curve. The acquisition prices are still very, very reasonable. There's a lot of room for appreciation of the asset, but it's already popular enough to cash flow very, very well. And as it continues to climb in popularity, occupancy rates, ADRs should go up as well. So you can kind of bookend it, not very popular, most risk, very popular, least risk, something in the middle that kind of, maybe the sweet spot that lets you catch the rest of the curve up. So anyway, that would be my why that curve is important and how we as investors with different timelines really would look at where we would want to position our investment, along that curve.
That makes complete sense. But let me ask you this. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but if you were to determine today which region in Central America would be the best region to invest in, what would that be? What region would that be?
I'm very specific. People ask me this question a lot, and I answer it right now. I've answered it for about a year this way, and I'll probably answer it for another year to 2 years. I think there's a 3-year window, and we're about a year into it right now. Belize, generally, Ambergris Caye, more specifically, the Best Western studio condos, very specifically. It's a branded product. It serves a mainstream traveler. It serves a cruise ship kind of customer, right? It's a middle-class product. It's a 2-3 star product. And again, this is the idea. A lot of times people get hung up, well, I don't like Best Western. You know what? I don't like Hawaiian pizza. But if I owned a pizza parlor, I would sell Hawaiian pizza, because it's not about what I like. It's about what the person walking through the door likes, right? And so a lot of times people kind of get hung up on this idea. Well, I would never stay in a Best Western. Okay, you know what? If you got $160,000 to invest in a property, you're right. You're probably not staying in the Best Western, right? But there are a lot of people who do, because it's a very price point product. It's the only off water. It's 3 blocks off the water. So I mean, literally, 5-minute walk, you're at the beach, right? But you're not paying beachfront prices. You're paying $120, $150 a night to stay there. That traveler, that middle-class traveler looking for certainty of product, they know what they're going to get. It's a standard. They're going to get the Best Western, right? And so for that traveler, there is no other option on the island of Ambergris Caye. And so again, Belize generally, because it's really in the sweet spot of the curve. Ambergris Caye, because that tiny little island off the coast of Belize generates 70% of all the tourism revenue for the country of Belize. And then the Best Western Studios, because it's a branded product off the water for a middle-class consumer, and there's no competition for that product on the island today. That to me is bullseye, 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 just drilling it right down. Yep.
Yeah, that's a great answer. What about this? Just say you have an investor and he's wanting to invest in Central America. How important is it to that investor to find out how many units a developer is selling in that area?
I think it's critically important, Hugh. I think the one of the biggest factors that I would always ask when a developer is selling property or selling product, right, condo product especially, it depends. So let me bifurcate the world and say lifestyle is a very different thing. Lifestyle has nothing to do with numbers, right? I mean, it just can you afford it? That's the only number that should ever come into play with a lifestyle purchase, right? Can you afford it? But after that, it's, do I like the view out my front window? Do I like my neighbors? Can I walk to my favorite restaurant? Have I found a Rotary Club or a church nearby? Or how far is it to the hospital? Right? I mean, there are a whole bunch of factors, that come into a lifestyle purchase that have nothing to do with numbers whatsoever, right? But then if you go to the numbers side, which is an investment purchase, and I would say vacation/investment, because a lot of people, they decide they want to own a vacation property, and they'll use it 2, 3, 4, 6 weeks a year, but the rest of the time they want to rent it out, right? And so they want the cash flow that comes from the unused time. And so I think there, it largely should be a numbers analysis, right? It should be a numbers analysis. So on the lifestyle side, the developer can sell 100% of their product because they're trying to create neighborhoods and community that, where people can enjoy themselves. So there's no reason for a developer to keep any inventory in that, right? But on the investment side, yeah, Hugh, your question's right on the money, right? If the return on investment is so great for a buyer who's coming along today to buy one, right? How many is the developer keeping for themselves, right? How many is that developer keeping? Because if they truly believe the numbers they're showing you, right, and the numbers are good numbers, right, and they should be, and we can't really talk about numbers, so we're not going to talk about numbers, but at the end of the day, if it's a number that's compelling enough to make you want to own it as an investment, right, probably it's a pretty compelling number for the developer too, right? So the question becomes, okay, if this is such a great investment, how many are you keeping, right? And I think that's really the right question to ask. In our Marriott, so we have the Marriott franchise on the water, Marriott residences. And by the way, that I would say would be also an incredible ownership opportunity for folks looking at Ambergris Caye, right? It's not the kind of investment that the Best Western Studio is, right? The Best Western Studio is Class B kind of residential space, right? It's Class B, right? But there's a lot of money in Class B residential space, right? That's what that is. The Marriott is oceanfront. It's an incredible ownership opportunity in beautiful residences that are oceanfront, Marriott type of thing, right? But that we're in that particular project, we are keeping at least 130 of the 202. We're going to keep over 60% of the residences in that Marriott project. Only 70 were available originally for private ownership, and about half of those are already sold. So we got another 35, whatever, something like that, left in that particular Marriott oceanfront residences. In the Bayman Gardens, the Best Western, we didn't start out this way. The demand, actually, Hugh, the demand has been incredible. We have literally sold out every building before we built it. We have sold out every building before we built it. This building that's going up right now is 26, and I think we haven't sold 6. We are designing as quickly as possible the next building, which is our harbor building, which will have, 30 in it. And as soon as that's designed and we can start selling in that, we will immediately stop selling in Galleon because we want to keep as many as we can there. It's probably 5 or 6 out of 26. So what's that? 20%. We'll keep about 20% of those. But in the harbor building, we want to get back to keeping at least a third of those. So each building, we'll keep about a third. But in our Marriott, we're keeping about 60%, a little over 60%. So it's the right question to ask. Absolutely.
So, we talked about in the last episode, we talked about baby boomers that could move to Central America and have maybe, lower cost for living.
Yeah.
They got a pleasant climate there. What about, and then cultural attractions, what about access to health care?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. And again, the perception versus reality. Belize has pretty good medical care. I wouldn't call it world class. I would just call it pretty good medical care. It's a small country, under 400,000 people. So you don't really have like the economic infrastructure to support, a major hospital, right? They've got a couple hospitals. They've got some clinics. It's pretty good. I mean, it's pretty good medical care, right? Nicaragua, by contrast, is the second poorest country in the hemisphere, second poorest, right? And you would think to yourself, my God, the medical care there must be dismal. Actually, they have world-class medical care, right? They had the 13th hospital that was JCI Gold accredited, Joint Commission International, in all of Central America, right? Think about that. The 13th hospital from Mexico to South America, JCI Gold accredited. And you would say to yourself, well, how does that make any sense? The second poorest country in the hemisphere. Well, let's just look at the population, 6 million people. 10% of which are, middle class or more. It's the typical, smaller middle class. There's more than 10%, but 10% of Nicaragua, which is 600,000 people, are kind of, well off. And I would say that 5% of those people are really well off. I mean, Nicaragua's got billionaire families and centimillionaire families and many, 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 millionaires, right? And so you've got 300,000 people in the country that all want world-class medical care. And when you got 300,000 people that are all pretty well off, guess what you have? Really good medical care. And so, right, it's this weird, kind of thing. Panama has got the Johns Hopkins facility associated with one of its hospital systems. Costa Rica has the SEMA system. And so again, you've got really great medical care in the region, world-class. And the thing that's just so hard for people to believe It's just simply how inexpensive it is. It's world class. Doctors that trained in the US and Europe and Canada and speak great English, right? I mean, I mean, we had all of our medical care. We lived in Nicaragua for 14 years. We had all of our medical care. I mean, literally, and it's so easy. Like, there's no calling your primary care physician and waiting this and doing. No. You call up, you say, I need to come in and see you. They say, okay, can you get in tomorrow at 2:00? You say, yes. So you go in. Right. You see the doctor. She says, and this happened to me. She says, hey, I need you to go downstairs and get an x-ray. You say, no problem. You walk down to imaging, whatever they call it there. Right. You walk in, you hand them in this case, hand them my Amex card, swipe it through, $60. You go in for your x-rays. You wait, I don't know, 10 minutes in the lobby. They hand you this thing of x-rays. You take it back upstairs to the doctor. She puts it up there and she reads it. I mean, yeah. And then you walk out and maybe the doctor was $35. I mean, $100. You've gone and seen the doctor twice. You've had your x-rays. And I mean, and it's all done on Tuesday. Tomorrow by 3:30, you're driving home, right? I mean, this and so while, yes, you should have insurance, and we did. We had this great expat policy, fly you anywhere in the world. You could get covered, air evac services, right? But we had a high deductible because we would just pay out of pocket for stuff like that. You go see the doctor's $30, $20. I mean, $50. I mean, it didn't matter. And so, yeah, great medical care, incredibly inexpensive, and physicians who, because they don't have to deal with all the insurance nonsense and like 6,000 pages of paperwork for every visit, they actually have the time to spend with you as a client, you as a patient, and engage you, which I found incredibly refreshing. And not all U.S. doctors feel so pressured, but many do. It's like a mill. You're in, you're out, boom, 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 right? I have some doctors here that, whatever, seem to be, they are very caring, right? But they're, by and large, almost every doctor is really caring because they have the time to be. So anyway, yeah, it's incredible.
So it's like getting back to the practice of medicine the way it should be. It goes back to caring for the individual. Not that they don't care here, but they're rushed and they have 1,000 different pieces of paper on each one.
I don't blame the doctors here. I mean, they're stuck in a system that really, crunches them, right?
It really does.
Yeah.
One more question, and I'm going to let you kind of give us a little review of where we've been. But so we've talked about baby boomers and retirement, but just say that we have a tech family that, mom and dad both are heavy into technology. They can work anywhere in the world as long as they have Wi-Fi, that computer by their side, and they've got 3 children.
Yep.
So moving to Central America with 3 children that need to have an education while mom and dad work, how does that work? How does that look in terms of education?
Yeah. Well, look, I took a 2-year-old daughter. We had another little daughter who came along. Both of my girls were educated in Nicaragua. They went to a German school, German-Spanish school for a number of years. Then we moved them to a Nordic school, which was Spanish-English when they got a little bit older. And then we kind of finished them off with some homeschooling. And there are some really great educational institutions. Costa Rica has Waldorf school. It has a country day school. It's got all of these countries have a U.S., like an American school or an international school that's largely on the American curriculum for embassy people, right? Because the embassy people are 2-3 years and they need to keep their kids on a, pretty U.S. standard kind of curriculum, country to country as they move around, right? So, but you'll find French schools, German schools, Nordic schools. You'll find, like I said, Waldorf, Country Day. You'll find Christian schools. There are Christian schools, and many are in Spanish or English and bilingual. So you'll have that option as well. What I've found is that if you and then there's homeschooling. Look, let's be really straight. I mean, COVID put most kids at home. I mean, almost all kids, whatever, for 6-8 months a year, and so the curriculums have become far more robust. And I think parents have become far more comfortable with the concept of like, wow, this is actually okay. My kids don't need to be in school to learn what they're supposed to learn. And they have a choice of curriculums today that they would have never had before, because there is no choice when you send your kids to school. And I mean, you can change schools, of course, but you can't really change the curriculum, right? And so I think this flexibility that we've seen in people's lives vis-a-vis education of their children has come a long way. And I would say in some very profound and important positive ways. Taking the step to Latin America, Central America, it's not a big leap anymore. I don't know that it ever was. I think coming back to perception and reality, I think a perception was this giant leap, but it was more like a little jump, and probably the younger you take your kids, the better, right? Taking high school kids, probably more challenging, more so from their perspective. Like, I don't want to leave all my friends, right? So I think, there's those kinds of considerations as well. But I'm a huge advocate of raising children, outside their home culture. And the reason is that when you raise children in a culture that's not your home, my home culture, right? You spend a lot of time talking about cultural differences, right? You talk about culture. Whereas if you're growing up in one location in the States, your parents are US, your kids are US, you don't talk about culture because it's just what it is, right? But the moment you start talking about why they do it differently than how we do it at home, or how we do it in the US, or how grandma and grandpa do it different, whatever, now all of a sudden you've engaged a child in this awareness of something called culture, which most people never have an awareness of because we're just in it. Like, we're just, it's air, we're just breathing it, right? But now all of a sudden you got this different air. And so you can switch from different air, but now you know that there's air. Wow, Hugh, what a difference that's made in our children's lives. I can see it in how they react to situations, how they think about things. And I would actually have to say that even more than the language, I mean, they're both actually they're trilingual. They're fully bilingual, English, Spanish. They speak German pretty well because they went to the German school when they were little. And so, and that's a great gift, by the way. That's a great gift. But I actually think the far bigger gift for our girls is this understanding of culture and the fact that they are bicultural. That's a big one. That's a huge one. Yeah.
Well, see, I think that's, I'm glad you brought that up because the cultural part of it is a huge part of the education. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is, if not, reading, writing, and arithmetic, that's great. Yeah. But you've got this culture and understanding, and you've experienced it, and you carry that with you everywhere.
Absolutely.
And so it's a different level, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Michael, you've given us so much information, and we appreciate you so much. And it's just an honor to have you with us today, and the fact that we've had 3 great episodes. And as I said earlier, in the episode description box, there's going to be information about how to contact you, how to get your various handbooks that you put together, and also a link to some of those developments you talked about that you've done in Belize on the 2nd episode. So I would encourage anyone that's watching today to be sure and go back to episode 2, episode 1. Some of it may be a little bit overlapping, but the totality of it is just great information coming from a great guy that's been there, done it. 30 years, that's a long time. It really is. And you don't look too old either, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, well, I used to have hair anyway. But
well, listen, I look forward to seeing you in Washington, D.C. soon.
Yep.
And we'll be there for an International Real Estate Federation chapter meeting, and you're a part of that, as I am also. And again, thanks so much for joining today. And hopefully we'll have some other time later to maybe talk about Panama or some of the other countries that we need to be discussing. Thank you so much.
I look forward to it.
Thank you. Thanks for joining in on today's episode of RealtyCast Global. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast to be notified when new episodes air.